The following is my conversation with Professor Dr. Joe Boaler, someone that I've learned so much from over the years. Not only an educator, but a prolific author, and her book Limitless Mind is one that I highly recommend to all the parents that want to raise resilient kids with a growth mindset. She's also behind an amazing app called Struggly that leverages neuroscience to help kids master mathematics. This is the Raising Game Changers podcast, and the following is my conversation with Dr. Joe Boaler. So, Dr. Boaler, I am actually a huge fan. You've impacted the way I educate and raise my kids. Your book is on that shelf right there that I've reread a few times. I wanted to ask you, what inspired you to get into math and to actually become an advocate for a revolution in math education all over the world?
Well, thank you. I'm glad that you've read the books and they're helpful. I see Mathematical Mindsets and Limitless Mind. And I have a new book coming out next year called Mathish. So I'll tell you about that. But how did I get into mathematics education? I actually had, not planned to be a mathematics educator. And I had gone through school doing pretty well at maths, but I wasn't very inspired by it. It was, answer these short questions, which I could do, but it didn't interest me until I was actually about 17. This was in England. And I had a really different teacher. She was an A-level teacher. And she made a couple of changes. One was she got us to discuss the ideas, and we sat in groups and we talked about, what does this mean? Why would we do this? What would be our preferred approach? And then we would all have a class discussion, and she would add information and ideas while we had this class discussion. So this just changed maths for me. It suddenly became a different subject, one that I enjoyed, one that had deeper meaning. And really from that moment on, I became really fascinated with the question of how we learn maths and the impact of teaching and learning. So in my early career, I started teaching in London. And in those years, I really got to understand how when we teach differently, it changes students completely.
It's so true that you say that. In my own experience, I had a teacher one time, a substitute teacher. So I come from Soviet Union, and math and science is a very big there. Well, very, very big there. And I never was really enjoying it. And one time we had a substitute teacher who actually was a professor at college. He came to school to help out. And when he came into the room, he was teaching physics. And he said, "Put the textbooks away. Donovan, I'm here for the whole week. You don't have to even bring the textbook in." And he started talking about applied physics and how physics is really applied throughout the world, and how he talked about time travel and all these interesting concepts. And he made us realize how big a billion is. If you stack up like a billion banknotes together, how tall that would be. And it just blew my mind. I got so interested in physics after that, because everything we're learning in textbook was so boring. But applied physics is so exciting. And ever since then, I was, very huge in physics and in math, and it really goes to show how big one teacher can make such an impact in your life if you just change how you present it.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I share this often with teachers, because I think many teachers feel they're trapped inside this broken education system, and they're having to use textbooks that they don't really think are the best for kids, and they're giving tests that the districts have given them to do, and they don't feel that they can give kids this joyful, mathematical, playful maths experience. And some say to me, and if I do that, then they're going to suffer when they go to their next teacher, and it's all about textbooks. And I always say, they won't suffer going from you, because once you change kids and once you help them see that maths is really an exciting subject, they are helped going forward, no matter what the next class looks like. So yeah, I totally agree. One teacher can change everything, even inside the system that we're in.
They really do. And it's so interesting. You made me realize how different we look at math. When me and you met at the Museum of at Math back in May, when you were doing the presentation, and you were showing us different visuals of how we approach math differently, me and my wife were both there, and we were both talking in the car about, and we're taking pictures of the presentation.
Mhm.
So she was going through the pictures in the car saying like, look, we solved it completely different. Every single problem, me and her, came from a different solution,
Mm,
right? And then
mm.
we come home and we show it to our son, and he had a completely different way to solve the
Oh,
same
nice.
exact problem. It was
Yeah,
so interesting that like heritage has nothing to do with it. It's really how
right.
your mind is so different. In
And
your
that,
book, yeah, go ahead, please.
I was just going to say, that is such a key insight. If we could just change maths classrooms in that one way to listen to students' thinking and ideas about how they see and approach problems, that changes everything. That is really what changed for me in that classroom back in England. But yeah, it's totally key. All the students see and think differently, and that's teachers' greatest resource, actually, their students' thinking.
In your book, one of the biggest revelations for me that I've never thought about before, chapter 2 is my favorite, when you talk about the importance of struggle.
Mm-hmm.
And I never obviously knew the workings of neuroscience and what myelin is. So if you could please, for my audience, elaborate a little bit on the importance of struggle and the ability of us to really use that to develop super brains, as you call it,
Yeah,
super
yeah.
duper pathways.
Super pathways in the brain. Yeah. I mean, I work with neuroscientists at Stanford, and they're very clear about it. The only time you're learning really is when you're struggling. It is the very best time for your brain. It's when your brain is on fire with connectivity and growth. And so many of us have been made to feel bad about struggle. So many children I know, when they find something really difficult in maths class, they start to think, I'm just not good. I don't have a maths brain. They start going downhill, but that's really the best time for them. And we don't do enough in our education system to value those times of struggle, to encourage it. When I teach young children, I teach children in summer camps, I teach undergrads at Stanford. I share with all of them, I want you to struggle. I'm giving you this problem so that you will struggle, because that's going to be really great for your brain. And you don't want to have as a goal going into maths class and getting everything right. But we've definitely given kids the impression that that's what tells you you're good. So we need a big kind of cultural reset, not just in classrooms, but in our culture more generally, to value those times of struggle. And as you say, it's when so one of the things I said to my undergrads just last week is, we learn by doing maths questions, by working on maths problems. It's actually doing the problems that lays down those pathways in the brain and strengthens pathways. And what we want is what neuroscientists call being at the edge of your understanding. That's when you get the most impact on your brain and the most strengthening and laying down of different pathways. So many of my undergrads at Stanford, they come to Stanford having been, very successful in maths. They think that, they can learn by listening to lectures, but that's not how we learn. We learn by trying maths and doing maths. So, yeah, it's a big reset we need in our culture.
You mentioned cultures, and it's interesting. You come from Great Britain. I come from former Soviet Union.
Mhm.
You've traveled all over the world, and you've seen how different cultures approach education in math
Mhm.
specifically differently. What would you say was like the most interesting culture when it comes to math education that you found? Since you've been pretty much, you just
I
came from
mean,
Australia recently,
yeah, yeah.
so what was the most like interesting find that you found
I
worldwide?
think my biggest surprise probably was when I was in classrooms in China. And when I was in China, we were going around to lots of different high school classrooms, and I watched a lesson that is a very procedural lesson in the United States, which is learning about complementary and supplementary angles. And the teacher just made it so different, because she said, what's our definition of this type of angle? And the students said what they thought it was. And so she kept pushing them, saying, oh, does that mean I could do this? Does that mean this works? This works? And they were all laughing. And She was like saying these ridiculous things to test their idea that they'd come up with. And they spent the whole hour on this, just playing with different examples, testing it out. And I thought, oh, this is so interesting, because so many people think that in China it's all about, drill, and that's why they're successful as a country. But it's actually a very conceptually oriented approach. That
Yeah,
was definitely
we have a lot
reasonable.
of misconceptions about a lot of other countries, comes from a
Yeah,
lot of
I'm
various
curious
propagandas.
about mathematics in the Soviet Union, because it's a country where women do really well, much better, and stay in maths a lot more than. But I've never visited, so I haven't got the insights
Yeah,
about that.
no, in Soviet Union, you see, there was always to begin with, there was always equality of men and women and everything kind of thing. So we never had this gender separation.
Mm-hmm.
So we never had this what you call the math myth.
Mm-hmm.
We never struggled with it. We like everybody
Mm.
was treated equally, everybody was expected to perform. Again, there was a huge role of teachers in this. I
Yeah.
was a little bit lucky with that because I come from my parents are both educators. My dad was a high school principal and
Mm-hmm.
teacher of Russian language and literature. So they had a pick of which school to send me to because they knew all the
Mm.
connections they had. So I actually went to
Right.
a good school. One of my mom's closest friends was one of the best teachers in math in the city that I'm from. And also my dad hired a private tutor for me before we came here. So when I
Mm.
came here, like I was really good in math when I came here, especially given the standards here. I quickly
Right.
became uh champion in mathematics in New York
Mm-hmm.
State. We had this called
Mm-hmm.
competition there, got a medal in Stuyvesant High School. you
Mm-hmm.
know, Chess was big for me, and I'm trying to impart that on my kids. But the way you impart it, like, is important. And I have this printout here from UCubed, the website you
Oh yeah.
founded. The
Uh-huh.
advice for parents,
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which I email to all my friends.
Oh great.
I also buy your book and send it to people that I want to help
Great.
raise kids better, because I
Yeah.
think it's revolutionary how you look at struggles as opportunities versus, there's
Mm.
always overprotective parenting in the United States. There's a lot of
Yeah.
helicopter parenting and trying to,
Right. A lot. Yeah.
and I
And
think I might have been one of them if I didn't read your book.
I think as parents and as teachers, we try and save our kids from struggling
It's a
and
natural
jump
instinct.
in. Yeah, jump in and take away the struggle. Teachers, definitely, there's almost an implicit contract in classrooms that if a child asks for help, the teacher comes along and breaks it down until it's so accessible, there's no struggle left. And so, yeah, as parents, we need to learn that too. And we know that valuing mistakes is an important part of kids developing a growth mindset. And you have to really work on that as a parent. I mean, if you're, I don't know, watching the older sibling be really over exuberant and knock over the younger one, or they knock off your favorite piece of art and it shatters in pieces. I mean, how we respond in those moments to struggles and mistakes our kids have is super important. They actually found that young children have different mindsets by the time they're 3, and
Wow.
that has come from the way that parents have responded to times of struggle.
That's interesting. That's so
Yeah.
interesting. And one of the most peculiar things to me when it comes to growth mindset, and let's just define for the audience, if you don't know what the growth mindset is, please look into it. It's probably the most important parenting concept to understand, that our ability to learn is limitless as long as you put in the work and the time. The concept that I learned from you is it's uh, the power of not yet,
Mm-hmm.
and so when it comes to that, what's really peculiar to me is the importance of praise. I never thought about how important the way we praise kids has this super profound effect. And Professor Huberman, also from Stanford, who I love very much, and I learn from him all the time from his podcast, was citing the study where they would put kids into two different groups, and one would praise how smart they are and how brilliant they are, and the other one would be just praised for effort and progress, and the tremendous impact it had, and how much better
Right,
the second group was
right.
performing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you
Yeah,
mentioned in your book even that I think it was Japan you were mentioning that in Japan they would like set you up for failure
mm-hmm.
in some of those classrooms that would really like encourage
Yeah,
or
yeah,
give you
that's right.
problems that don't have a clear answer to.
Another really interesting country where we've watched, even in kindergarten, the teacher really celebrate mistakes that kids made and put them on the board. But yeah, that study's fascinating. If it's the same one where they praised one group for being smart and they praised the others for struggling, and then they offered them another problem to do and said, would you like the easy one or the hard one? And the kids who were praised for being smart all chose the easy problem, because they want to keep this label. They don't want to do something that might expose them. So whereas the kids who are praised for struggling and for working hard, many of them chose the more difficult problems. So, I mean, what was interesting to me about that study was the immediate impact of that praise.
Like really immediate. Like the second, right after the study, they give me another
Yeah,
problem, and just like, whoa, just like that. After
just like that. Yeah.
just
Mm-hmm.
like that, it changes your mind. And like you say, also, you go to sleep with one mind, but you wake up with a whole different mind just overnight.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
how fast the brain
Yeah.
changes.
Our brains are in a constant state of flux and change, and such an important message for kids that we often don't give. That your brain is constantly changing. In one maths class in school, there's so much opportunity for the brain to shift and lay down more new pathways and strengthen pathways. And I saw some recent data that had a really, really high number of parents who believe that you're born with a math brain or you're not. And
Wow.
that's the
Still,
myth that we have to get rid of. Yeah, still, it was like 90% of parents believe that. So we have a lot of work to do in
that's
getting
true.
that.
And let's talk about the work you're doing, because Struggly is very interesting to me. So please, if you're a parent, go to struggly.com. This will be the best money you invest in your child. I promise you that. So, Dr. Bola, elaborate a little bit for our audience. What's Struggly all
Yeah.
about?
So I've had a lot of math app developers come to me over the years and say, work with us. And I look at their maths app and it's all about speed and getting lots of correct answers. But then I had a different group come to me. They're actually from Germany, and they had a lovely award-winning design firm. And one of the leaders of the company said her daughter, who was 8, had had significant maths anxiety. So she started giving her the problems we have on our website and in our books. And she said now she loves maths. She's top of the class in maths. So she really wanted to get more of the activities and ideas out in a different way to more people. So we worked together to make a new maths app. And because we really want students to feel good about struggle, we called it Struggly. And it gives kids these visual creative tasks, but rather than getting rewarded for doing lots of things quickly, they get badges for struggling and making mistakes or thinking about an idea in a different way, or keeping going and persisting. And one of the things I loved about these designers I'm working with, unlike any other app I've seen, it actually has managed to value the different ways kids think, because, which we were
Hmm.
talking about at the beginning, a lot of apps are really looking for one answer. And if students don't input it in the right way, they get a big no, you're wrong. So we just started Struggly. It's been out for a few months. I'm hearing great things. Teachers are saying they're using classrooms and the kids don't want to stop.
Yes.
And they say to each other, come and struggle with me. And so it's going well. And yeah, we hope a lot more people will go to it.
I
It is.
highly recommend it, especially the solution for kids who kind of want to use devices. So I limit my device use with my kids very much. So they
Mm.
found a trick. But what about Struggly, Dad? I can go on that. So, like they know they can go watch like Khan Academy, they can go to Struggly, so they've like they have their ways to manipulate me to get to use devices in the way that all right, fine, this is a good compromise. If you're
Yes.
going to go, if you're going to go and struggle, you can go ahead and do that. And so let's talk about a little bit of technology, Dr. Bowler. In your experience, like how does the technology impact the way we learn or educate in maths and other sciences?
Well, that's a big, complicated question, of course,
Yes, I'm
that
known
we
for that.
have to
Sorry.
grapple with. What do we do about technology and the different technologies? And certainly, I think, it's really about when and how we use technology. It's not a question of if we do. I mean, we live in this century, and we should be using the technology that is available to us. So the question becomes like, how, in what ways will it help students learn? So yeah, I'm a big supporter of students developing number sense and really getting an understanding. I should tell you about my new books. It's a lot about that.
Oh yes, please, we will.
Numbers. But a calculator is a tool that can help them. And so certainly we should not be arguing about calculators anymore. That is actually a tool from last century. And now we have many other helpful tools. I mean, when I teach students, and we regularly run summer camps for students, we have iPads around, and sometimes students, struggling with something in particular, and we encourage them, go and look that up on the internet, or go to Wolfram Alpha and see what they do with it. And so, yeah, I think technology can definitely be a really helpful tool. Of course, AI is the one that's providing the biggest.
That was my next question to you. What do you think about AI and how that's gonna
Well, I
impact?
think AI is here to stay. So what we should do with AI is work out how it can be helpful to us. I'm interested in myself in how tools like ChatGPT can make lessons better for teachers. You can actually ask the AI tool to come up with different examples. You're teaching this maths concept, give me 10 different examples of places this will be used. Now, I don't think it's perfect at all. And what we know about the way things like ChatGPT works is it's searching a database of lots of information inside the system. So if we ask it to do a maths problem, for example, it doesn't do the maths problem. It searches for the solution.
Yes.
And so often it's wrong, and solutions are wrong. Actually, I asked ChatGPT what my birthday was, and it gave me the wrong date. And I tried to correct it, and I got like told off for trying to impersonate a
Have you
public
tried
figure.
have you tried Grok yet?
No, what's that called?
Grok is the one on Twitter. So if you get a premium account on Twitter, which I
Uh-huh.
did, you get access to the new AI on Twitter, the one that Elon created. It's called Grok. It's got a fun mode. I got to tell you, the fun mode is hilarious. And if you ask, you can ask it to roast you based on your handle on Twitter, and it'll roast you. And I got to tell you, I asked him to roast me, and it made fun of me to a point where I was like, damn, that's
It,
pretty good.
it knew you.
It knew me
Yeah.
very well based on my few thousand posts, and you should
Mhm.
try it. You might be surprised at the result. You'll be like, wow, this is pretty on point about me. So
Yeah, I will try it. That sounds fun.
AI is definitely the data set that it uses kind of right now is important for the output it provides. I'm
Yeah.
thinking, what I'm thinking is obviously technology impacts us and there's no going back, right? So, but the last revolution that we had, like the industrial revolution, it
Mm,
didn't take away any jobs. I mean, it did immediately, but then it created more jobs to service the new
yeah.
jobs, you know?
Mm,
So we're not using, nobody's going plowing the fields anymore with their hands. They're using tractors, but people have to create tractors, they have to fix tractors and all this kind of thing, right?
yeah.
But with
Yeah.
AI, I think it might be different because there's that notion that AI will not replace you. Humans who use AI will replace you. But at the same time, I'm very concerned that those kids right now who are not learning how to leverage AI are being left behind because
Mm,
the marketplace is becoming global. And I believe our kids are not going to be competing within the country anymore. They're going to be competing in a global marketplace. And I know for a fact that Chinese already and Russians and Indians are introducing AI in their early classrooms as young as
mm,
7, 8 years old. They're learning how to leverage AI because
mhm.
if you think about it, I think Einstein said it, right? If you can look it up, don't memorize it. Do not use
Yeah.
your brain cycles on memorizing
Believe
something that
that.
you can look up.
Yes. Yeah.
And that was before Google was around.
Right. Right.
So
And
today,
a place where I'm really sort of cognizant of the need to bring technology in is when I look at the high school math standards, where we're still teaching students to do these long methods by hand, which in the real world they will never ever use in that way. They will never have to go through synthetic division, remembering every step of it, because they would program a computer to do that. So I do think we're not teaching in a way that recognizes that we're in this world that we're in with technology. Conrad Wolfram is always very interesting on that, asking the question of how would maths classrooms change if we recognize that technology is available? And of course that they would change it a lot. So I obviously students need to understand what they're doing. What's the biggest the most important thing you can do with technology is know what you're asking. You have to know what you're asking the AI tool to do, or any technology. And so for maths learners, if they knew what to ask and they could interpret the information that came back, and they could make sense of it, and you know, set up models and use technology to help them calculate, we would be pushing them into really important thinking that they need in this 21st century. So I think we should be recognizing technologies around, and it should have us really relook at what we're expecting students to do.
And it can also help personalize the learning around
Absolutely.
individuals, you know, because like you showed, everybody looks at the same problems so differently.
Yeah,
And technology would allow
certainly can.
educators.
I mean, I don't think technology has really been our friend so far in that path of giving students a maths experience where it recognizes how they think, because most technology has gone down the road of they love maths questions because there's one answer. And so I think technology needs to up its game. It needs to do better at developing systems that recognize how kids think and draw from that.
I think
I
we'll get
don't
there.
think it's done that very well so far.
Mark Anderson was on a podcast I was listening to recently on Joe Rogan's. He was talking about how, you know, like right now, our kids are already using technology. So like AI will know them and grow with them. So it'll be basically a personal assistant, because it will know your sleep patterns. It will know everything there is to know about you. You can ask it based on its personal knowledge of you, how you can do
Mm.
things better. It will solve for the problems that you shouldn't be involved in, and actually help you work on other things. So it could be a real like personal AI assistant to our kids and shape their future in a
Yeah,
lot of different ways.
yeah.
And it remains to be seen. Of course, you're right about the fact that so far technology has not been our best friend, and especially, what is your take on social media impact on kids and learning, Dr. Ball? I'm curious to find that, because my take on this is a little controversial. I look
Mm.
at social media. Yeah, not all the parents that I talk to agree with me on this, because they just they try to keep their kids away from social media. And I look at that as, and then what happens when they grow up? Then they get involved in this world. They're not ready to deal with it at all. So I think I use an analogy of sex education, because,
Mm.
you know, abstinence does not help. What helps is education about condoms. That helps. You know, same thing I think is here is like, I want to teach my kids how to leverage social media. I think entrepreneurship is really key for that, because if you a creator of content, you stop
Mm.
being a mindless consumer of content, and that
Mm.
changes the paradigm shift.
If
Like,
you're one of those amazing smart parents that see tremendous value in entrepreneurial journey for kids, but don't know where to start or what's even possible today, I've got great news for you. We just launched a 4-day free challenge that will show you proven frameworks and use real-life examples of kids who've become millionaires by using the leverage available to them today, which was only available for large companies before. So go to mykidentrepreneur.com/challenge and join the free 4-day challenge. Can't wait to see you there. And again, it's mykidentrepreneur.com/challenge. See you inside.
like my
Right.
own son, now that he has got a business, he's running it, his consumption is tied to what he wants to make content about. You know, so it's no longer just mindless scrolling or doom
Right.
scrolling.
Yeah.
It's limited in time, limited in
Yeah.
scope. It's targeted. It has a goal. So, and I taught him the importance of journaling, and he journals, and I tell him to write every morning. If today is the day, one of the days he's got a schedule of days he's allowed to use social. What's the goal of using
Mm.
social media for this half an hour today?
How old is he?
He's 9.
Oh,
He's 9 years old, but he's,
that's
you know,
great.
mature 9. Yeah, he's a
Yeah,
mature
that's
9.
really great.
We
Well,
chose to go ahead,
I don't
please.
disagree with that. I think you're right. our young people will be entering a world of social media and they need to learn how to work with it. I definitely have seen the downsides of social media as a parent of two girls who have grown up with social media, and I've had to work to counter some of the ideas and messages. I see them post on places like Instagram, and every comment responds to how pretty they look. And so I worry about that. I worry about a lot of things that that happen in that social media post. I mean, we've all seen students children who've had terrible things happen with social media.
Yeah.
So for sure, we need to be really careful with it, and we need to help students, children rather, make sense of it in the right ways and use it in the right ways. I agree with you. I'm not try to take it away from children and make it banned, because then it just becomes more enticing and they will use it secretly without any parental oversight. So I think we just have to be really careful with it. And, you know, if I could wave a magic wand and have social media go away completely, I would think about that, because I think it's certainly got a lot of downsides. But at this point, I think the sensible thing is we all help children make sense of it in good ways.
Absolutely. I agree with you that if I had a magic wand, I might have just canceled the whole thing to begin with.
Yeah.
Because the effect on our society has not been positive. It's
Yeah.
been
No.
quite negative. I would keep the podcast though. I do
Yeah.
enjoy them very much. I learn from
Podcast.
amazing people like you. I listen to podcasts with Lex Friedman, who brings interesting guests on, where I listen to your podcast with him. You know,
Yeah.
I love podcasting. It's
Agree with
an
you.
amazing way to get access to people that otherwise before. Where could I have spoken to or listened to Professor Dr. Joe Boaler, one of my favorite author, you know, like
Yeah.
this podcasting medium is absolutely amazing. And I'm encouraging my son to start his own podcast already. So he's 9, he's early, he tried. We did a few
Yeah.
episodes with
Great
him,
idea. Mhm.
you know, but he's getting into it. And I told him, like, it's about what interests you. You don't have to speak to me. Find out what interests you, and we will facilitate. And I told him, I'll promise you, people that you think will not talk to you will talk to you. It's our preset conditions and you know, preconceived notions. We think, oh no, who am I for him to speak to me? And yet here we are speaking with Dr. Bowler. You know,
I love it. Yes, I love podcasts too, and they're very educative. It's like reading a book, but with the author talking with you. So it's different, very different to people posting anonymously on social media and starting movements of disinformation and other things that have happened. So yeah, let's keep the podcasts and delete some other things.
just a podcast that get rid of all the negative highlight reels of our lives. You know, like Facebook was supposed to bring us together, but it did the totally opposite. Because people only post the good parts of their life, and nobody realizes how really miserable they are and lonely they are.
Yeah.
And also, I think from my own experience, I can tell you that we used to get together a lot more often with friends and relatives before social. Because now we feel like, oh, I've seen your pictures, I know I've seen you, but the human interaction lessened, the need for it lessened, because we feel like
that's true, and that human interaction turns out to be really important for people. And of course, COVID put a big dent in that for many people, and we see the damage of it. So I think that's something we should all think about. Yeah.
I want to ask you a question about games. So, but before I do, I want to read this real quick. So the 6th advice you give to parents, and please, guys, go Google Joe Bowler advice for parents. It'll take you to YouTube page. You'll get this easy to download PDF, and I couldn't recommend it more. So let's go quickly through the 6 things.
Okay.
Encourage children to play math puzzles and games, right? Number 1. Number 2, always be encouraging and never tell kids they're wrong when they're working on math problems. Instead, find logic in their thinking. Love that. 3, I don't know this, by the way, because in Soviet Union, we also use speed. So never associate maths with speed. It is not important to work quickly, and we know that forcing kids to work quickly on maths is the best way to start math anxiety for children, especially girls. See, I didn't know that at all. I actually like where I come from, and also here in the United States, speed is always test,
Right.
you know, with speed. This one, I showed this to my wife immediately. when I read this. I'm like, never share with your children the idea that you were bad at maths in school or you just like it, especially if you're a mother. Researchers found that as soon as mothers shared the idea with their daughters' achievements went down. Number 5, and this one I'm working with my son on because I actually have the way I calculate things is always using number sense. So encourage number sense. What separates high achievers and low achievers is number sense, having an idea of the size of numbers and being able to separate and combine numbers flexibly. So I always tell them, like, look for the tens. I always look for the tens. I add zeros right away, and then I do the little ones at the end. If you ask me to like multiply 15 by 12, first thing I would do is 150 plus 24.
Right.
That's how I would solve it.
Yeah.
And the 6th one, and the most important, perhaps the most important of all, encourage a growth mindset. Let students know they have unlimited math potential and that being good at math is all about working hard. What's really interesting to me, and I want to talk to you about another mindset. What's really interesting to me about growth mindset is just the mere understanding of that kind of helps you develop it. That's a very interesting concept. Like, we have to work hard on things, but just understanding that you have a limitless potential already empowers you to actually never to get like frustrated with work and look at it. Ability to reframe struggle, I guess.
Yeah.
And look at it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I definitely find that when I work with students, people around the world, just sharing with them the information about how their brain works begins that process of developing a growth mindset. And it is a process. It's not like a switch that you can put on and off, but just learning about the brain and brain growth and brain development and brain strengthening will start that process in people where they realize that they can learn anything and that they should let go of these fixed ideas that they can't do things.
I also learned about stress as an enhancing mindset. Have you heard about that, Dr. Boaler?
I have heard that small amounts of stress can help and get you sort of, in a good learning position. And I think large amounts of stress do the opposite. That's what I've learned. Maybe you know more than
Yeah, I
that.
was listening to a podcast on Dr. Huberman, Andrew Huberman, who's got his podcast also from Stanford. By the way, something going on in Stanford, I think, with you guys, because everybody I'm learning from comes from Stanford. You, Dr. Carol Dweck, Robert Sapolsky, Andrew Huberman. One of my favorite guys to like. I have 3 books that I sent to my close friends. So your book is one of them, Mindset by Carol Dweck, and also Dr. BJ Fogg, Tiny Habits. He's a behavior design scientist out of Stanford as well. So I was talking to my wife the other day in preparation for this podcast. I'm like, what's interesting to me? Something's good going on at Stanford, must be, because everybody I'm learning from comes from Stanford. So
Interesting.
yeah. So Andrew Huberman had a podcast interview with, I forgot the name of the person. He was interviewing another doctor from a different university who was talking about stress as an enhancing mindset and basically just realizing that stress could be helpful. Again, just the mere understanding of that allows you to, your body literally physically treat stress differently.
Yeah,
and
you reposition. Yeah.
reposition yourself to actually look at stress differently. So but
Yeah.
wanted to ask you about games. So you talk about here, number 1, encourage children to play math puzzles and games. Anyone in particular that you're a fan of that you would recommend? Like, obviously, Cubic Rube I have behind me. There's like other games. Any particular games that you would recommend to parents to like kind of look into?
Well, any games with dice are going to be helpful
Mhm.
as students are developing numbers and number sense. So even, snakes and ladders or anything where they're rolling dice is helpful. I love patterns. I love games that encourage patterns and logical thinking with no dice or no numbers. Things like Set, if you know the card game Set, where you have to think about which are in and outside of different sets of patterns. So a lot of games really help students with that mathematical and logical thinking. Chess, you mentioned.
Well, chess to me is, I teach my kids chess from very early age. I utilize neuroscience to get them hooked on it. So there's a 3-step process that I've designed, knowing everything that I've learned from people like you and Tiny Habits by Dr. BJ Fogg. So the 3-step process actually is quite simple. I think parents forgot along I call it the parental trick, boredom. Boredom is amazing. When you bore kids out, they
Mhm.
get very creative. There were many studies linking boredom to heightened creativity, and introspection. So what I would do is I always just unplug the router in my house. There's no more internet. There's nothing to do, and I will take them outside, and I would make sure they get bored, right? And it also helps reset their dopamine level to baseline.
Mm.
The second step is creating the environment where it's easy for the behavior to take place. Because as I know from behavior design, if the motivation is not very high, then the ability goes down, right? So it has to be easy. So with books, like you see this library I've set up, in my kids' rooms, we have bookshelves on their level, so they can just pull out a book. We always buy many, many different books on different topics. So that whatever interests them that moment, they can just read about that. And always has to be new books, because we know novelty is critical, right, for the brain to get interested in. And also, boredom serves as a trigger in behavior, because we all know for behavior design needs a trigger. So that's the first like two steps, right? And the third step would be intermittent random reinforcement, which I've learned from Dr. Robert Sapolsky, also from Stanford, that it actually increases a baseline, flushes you with about 400% of dopamine and cements that
Mm.
behavior. This is what casinos use so successfully against its clients, right? That's why uh, that's why people are hooked on casinos, because occasionally you win, and
Mhm.
that occasional win drives that behavior over and over and over again, even though your rational logic tells you will never make money, you'll always lose money. And people keep going and losing and keep going and losing, because that occasional win drives that behavior. So I got my kids hooked on reading and playing chess using the 3 steps. With chess, I would set up the chessboard. I would turn off the internet. There's no TV, there's no cartoons, there's nothing to do. And I would just sit there. So my daughter
Mm.
would get bored, and she's like, Dad is sitting there. Might as well go play with him, do something. And she started just moving figures. Then I'll explain to her the strategy of the game. And little by little, she got into it. Now we play almost daily when I have the time to sit down with her in the morning. We play every
Nice.
day. And the same with reading.
That
Got
will
my
really help
kids.
them.
Yeah. So this 3-step process, I tell
My
everybody that I
game
speak to.
that I really got into when I was young was backgammon. Although I don't play it so much anymore, I should get out my backgammon board. But all of these games are super helpful, logical thinking, working out space. Yeah, I think.
My wife will be so excited to hear that you recommend backgammon, because we literally started. Because I used to play backgammon growing up, so Union all the time.
Mm.
And she asked me to teach my kids, like last week. I was teaching them how to play backgammon. And it was obviously very tedious for me to teach them. It's like, all right, I got to do this, but she's going to be very excited to hear you say that, because now she's going to be, reinforced in her belief that backgammon is a good game. But what is your take on cards? What are your take on card games? Because obviously there's a danger to it in terms of gambling, but
Mm.
there's a lot of interesting card games that are very.
Yeah, I think so. I haven't personally, I don't know a lot of card games, although I played I played them growing up. And I imagine, just the same, they're helping kids with that mental thinking, holding things in their mind, working out sequences. Yeah, it's got to be really helpful, I think. One of our favorite activities actually currently that we have in our books, we have a set of K8 books for kids, is one where you have a group of kids or some kids, and you just throw 20 dice down on the table and ask them, what number, how many is it from these 20 dice? And kids learn to group the numbers in different ways, just as you were saying, I like to take the tens, and they make numbers out of different dice together. It's such a productive activity. Kids make these lovely posters thinking about number relationships. So, it has an element of play in it, and you can throw the dice and they're different each time. And so, yeah,
Thank
all
you
of
for that
these.
recommendation. The second I'm done with this podcast, first thing I'm going to Amazon and ordering a bunch of dice.
Yeah, dice are great.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Seriously. All right. I know you're very busy. I know your time is limited, so we're going to be wrapping this up soon. But I want to finish and talking about your upcoming book. Since you mentioned your book,
Yeah.
let's talk about what's inside. What are we looking forward to? Because I'm so excited that you're going to be publishing another book, Dr. Boaler.
Yeah, I'm excited too, because I haven't published a book about maths for quite a while now, since Mathematical Mindsets first came out, which was almost 10 years ago now. So the book is called Mathish, and it's has a subtitle too. But the idea of Mathish is this, that virtually everywhere we use maths in the world, the answer that we're looking for is an ish answer. So I'll give you some examples. You might have conversations with your kids where you say, well, how big is the moon tonight? Or how long is the journey to the airport? Or how much, how much
Yeah, go ahead, please.
time is it going to take to do this? Or how old are you? Or, you know, there are many, many questions I could talk about. How long is that bridge? How much paint do I need to paint that wall? How many people are in that crowd? I mean, I could go on and on and on. And there are a lot of questions in the world where the answer is a kind of an ish answer. But in classrooms, what we focus on is precision all the time. Everything has to be precise. Calculate this number exactly. But what we know is that when we're very precise with numbers and when we're kind of ish with numbers, those involve different parts of the brain. So one's a kind of big picture thinking, like what sort of number should this be? And one is very precise. And we need to teach our kids to move between those different types of thinking. So what I'm arguing for is that we actually spend more time with an ish lens in classrooms. I'm not saying, because a lot of people misquote what I say, so I have to be really careful about this. I'm not saying that precision is not important, but I'm saying we need a balance. And that balance is what it's out of balance at the moment. And that ish lens, it turns out, so a teacher wrote in our Facebook group recently, I'm really sad when we have numbers like 247 divided by 9 or 3/4 divided by 1/3. Our students go into calculating mode and they lose all sense of the number, like what should the number be? And they come up with answers and she said, do we not have time to instill the joy of number sense? So my answer to that is, before kids should do any calculation, they should always come up with an ish number first, because that ish number will get them into a sort of bigger picture thinking. And you and I and other people who are, have had a lot of education, we can come up with ish numbers. Like if I ask somebody to work out 24 divided by 7, they very quickly get a sense of what that number should be, because you have to have number sense to be able to come up with an ish number. And coming up with an ish number helps kids get number sense. It helps them develop that. And you can take this kind of lens, not just with a number question, but I don't know, if kids are having to plot a graph of f of x plus 1, just asking them, what do you think it's going to look like? This requires a different kind of thinking, a more in-depth thinking. So I've been presenting this. It's a new book, and I haven't got it out. It's not out yet. It comes out in May, though you can pre-order it. But
I will.
I've shared it at a couple of conferences now, and immediately got emails back from teachers saying, oh my gosh, I went back, I shared this with my kids, and it has completely changed the classroom conversations. Now the students are figuring out their ish number first before calculating, and then they have a conversation about how far or close they were from the calculation. And this teacher said, I hear them now saying to each other, what's your ish number? What's your ish number? And then they talk about these together. And she said it's completely opened up the conversation. And one of the reasons I'm excited about it is it kind of can take off the hard edges of maths. Maths can seem like a very inflexible and hard and pointed kind of subject. And it softens those hard edges a little bit for kids.
What an interesting and fascinating concept, huh? Never thought about that.
So yeah, that's what the new book, it's about other things as well. Just about another thing I start the book with is, how do we teach kids how to learn? As maths teachers often go into classrooms just assuming kids know how to learn, and they just teach maths, and most kids don't know how to learn, and they don't know what they should be focusing on. So there's some teaching about that, and teaching about experiencing maths as a visual and physical set of concepts, not a lot of abstract rules.
That's so interesting. And you can pre-order it now on Amazon? That book
Yes.
is available to
Okay.
pre-order on Amazon. So there you go, guys. You have to go and get that book. I'm looking
Yes.
forward to that book,
Joe
Dr.
Boaler
Boaler.
and Mathish, it will pop up.
You said that it comes out in May.
Yeah.
Awesome. Looking forward to it. Maybe we can do another round of podcast after that book comes
Sure.
out to talk about it. You know,
Yes.
after I read the book, and I'm gonna have some questions, Dr. Bowler.
Yes. You'll have some questions.
Mm,
That would be great.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for this interview and for taking the time to talk to me. I really appreciate it. I'm a huge fan, and I can't wait to get your other book and to talk to you in the future. Thank you, Dr. Bowler.
Well, it's been very enjoyable. I appreciate connecting with you, Zach, and all of your audience. So, yeah, thank you for having me.
If you're one of those amazing smart parents that see tremendous value in entrepreneurial journey for kids, but don't know where to start or what's even possible today, I've got great news for you.